This video is based on the Cambridge IGCSE Business Studies Paper 2, and it's based on the topic of legislation. In terms of legislation, it relates to Unit 2 and Human Resource Management as it looks at labour legislation. In the textbook or in the specification, you should have considered the following. You should have looked at the legislations such as unfair dismissal, minimum wage, health and safety, discrimination. Now, within this article, what it considers specifically is minimum wage, health and safety, and unfair dismissal. So, I will look at the question in a minute, but what we'll do is we'll go through the case study first. But it's simply the question is just asking you to consider the impacts of these legislations on the business. Now, I'll give you a bit of time just to read the case study and just absorb the information. In the first couple of paragraphs, there's nothing really related to legislation. Now, it's worth remembering that in paper 2 it is a large case study because all of the questions are going to be based on it, and these questions relate to lots of different topics. So it could be argued that not all the case study would be relevant for this specific question. But if we turn to Appendix 2, we can see that this is an email regarding the employment laws. So if we give Appendix 2 a read, and if we highlight some of the key points which we could possibly use within the question. So the first legislation is based on minimum wage, and we can see here the legislation is asking for minimum wage, and let's say it's national minimum wage, to be increased by 20%. And as the sentence states, this is a worry because some employees might expect a wage increase. However, it is also worth noting that the photographers are already being paid 50% more than the minimum wage. So these three pieces of information where the arrow is pointing to can all be used as our application within the question. Now, the next legislation is unfair dismissal. And as we can see here, the law has changed in terms of unfair dismissal. So now employees who have been employed for only 6 months has the protection from unfair dismissal. So before, you'd have to work for the company for 2 years before receiving this protection, but now it's only 6 months. So again, we need to use this information as the application for our points. And the final legislation is just related to health and safety, and it's quite just simply stating that the business will need to give health and safety training to all employees now. So the question, consider the effects on FF, the company, of the following 3 legal controls, which are being introduced next year. Which legal control do you think will have the biggest effect on FF? Justify your answer. So initially, if we just do IDF to fully understand what the question is asking, we can look at the instruction. And the instruction, first of all, one of the key command words is to justify. So whenever you see a justify within the question, you know some form of conclusion will need to be given. It's also instructing you to look at three factors. And even though the question doesn't really state it, and it's asking you to consider, whenever you have to give a justification, it does require analysis, and a balanced analysis, before being in the position to fully conclude. Because what you need to make sure is that your answer is not biased in any way, that you've considered every single argument before you are in that position to offer a justified justification. The direction, or first of all, it's directing you to FF, the company. Therefore, every single answer, every single point made has to relate to this specific business and their situation. It cannot be generic. It cannot be about any other business. So once you read your points, I always think it's worth reading over your answer just to make sure it is obvious that it's about FF and not any other company. Also, it's directing you to the newly introduced legislations. So within your case study, it is key to have a look at where these are being introduced and what's being introduced. And we've already done that by looking at the appendix. Finally, the focus is the legal control. So that's the theory that we really need to consider. And even more of a focus, the focus is health and safety, minimum wage, and on the next page it will be unfair dismissal as well. So initially, let's concentrate on health and safety training now required for all employees. So remember what I said before, you need balance. So you need to give a point, an advantage of this training, but also a depends upon or maybe a disadvantage. So my first main point is the training may make the employees feel safer or more comfortable during photo shoots, as they know if any issues occur, they'll be prepared in handling the situation. Now I need to develop this further and give some more reasoning. So my development, I've put this preparation could not only boost motivation for the employee, but also boost their customer service, as they believe that they are providing a full service to the customer and therefore help with their main objective. If the employees feel that they can carry out the photo shoot, considering all possible angles in terms of if anything was to go wrong, if there was an issue with the customer, they could handle any kind of situation, then it's going to help them feel more motivated, and it's also, like I said before, going to improve their customer service. So we've got the point for why they should carry out the health and safety training, but now we need some balance. Again, this could be just a disadvantage of health and safety, or we could look at it depends upon. So now I've added some balance and I've gone down the route of cost because this training will increase costs for the business. So I've put, however, this could increase costs for the business as they would have to train all their employees. Yet it could be argued that the cost would be low as this type of photography doesn't hold many dangers. And that's just offering some application and actually offering a bit of balance, making sure that the examiner is aware that this student or this answer is saying that the biggest advantage is actually to the employees. Yes, it could cause cost, but should the cost really be that big? And it's quite an evaluative point, that last sentence. So now if we consider the minimum wage. So my first point is quite generic. I've just said the minimum wage may increase costs for FF, but what I need to do now is provide reasoning as to why it would increase costs and develop it within the application of the case study. So some reasoning, this is because their photographers may expect an increase in their pay. However, what I need to do is I really need to add the application now because there's so much information in that in those couple of sentences within the case study. So my application comes in, even though they are already paying well above the minimum wage, photographers may expect that gap to remain the same, meaning an increase in pay. So if there was a specific gap in pay between the original minimum wage and their pay, and that minimum wage increases, then the photographer may expect their pay to also increase to show the original difference. However, just to develop it further, I put, however, FF have no obligation, I should really put no legal obligation to pay further as they are already paying competitively. I do need a little bit of balance though. I need to consider, well, why might this be a good thing? Why might this law be a positive? So I've added a little bit of balance. I put, on the other hand, if FF did choose to increase their pay, it may justify how well they treat their staff financially, which could boost motivation, helping to increase productivity within the company. So within that paragraph, even though I said they don't need to do anything, this law actually it doesn't necessarily impact them at all because they're already paying above the minimum wage. There are some scenarios which they may need to consider. So the final law is the unfair dismissal. So as it says there, protection from unfair dismissal now applies to employees who have been employed for only 6 months instead of 2 years. So I need to do my initial point to start off with. So my initial point is, as FF are looking to expand, they might be considering increasing their workforce. So there's application within that opening sentence. This law may cause problems if their recruitment isn't successful. So again, now I need to explain what I mean by that and how could it impact the business if the recruitment isn't successful. So I need to just offer some further development. So my reason is if FF make any mistakes in recruitment, recruiting the wrong photographer or a photographer that has not lived up to their interview performance, it'll be harder to dismiss the worker. So again, I've just offered a little bit more development. As it takes time to recognise whether or not the photographer suits FF, it could be too late to easily dismiss them and therefore lead to a time-consuming process to prove that the employee is unfit for the company. So now I just need to consider what this ultimately means for the company and then also offer some balance. So ultimately, this could hurt their objective of customer service, more application there, as the quality of photographs or even the service could be poor. But now I need to do a however point and offer that balance. So a balance point is, however, this law would provide job security to the employees and this may boost their motivation and make them feel more at ease to be creative in their role. So every single paragraph every argument, I've made sure that I've considered both points of views, and from doing that, I'm in a much better position to offer a conclusion. So when offering my conclusion, I've considered which point is the most important, the most significant to this specific company. I've tried not to repeat what I've said previously. I haven't really wanted to introduce any new points. What I've done is I've considered why this legislation is more important than the other legislations and offered a weighted approach. So I've put in conclusion, I believe that the unfair dismissal might impact FF the most. So I've given my decision. Now I need to justify it. So the other legislations don't directly impact FF or have very little impact due to the current rate of pay and type of industry that they work in. However, FF have recently employed 8 new photographers and 2 part-time workers, as well as wanting to expand further. So I've really emphasised about their current workforce and their future workforce. And therefore, they have to be very careful about the legislation to avoid legal action. I believe that this legislation impacts them the most and could have the most significant consequences due to it impacting all new staff.